Gold is the original governor of government, actually. And this is the reason governments have abused and gone off of the gold standard. So historically, if you are a bank or a nation state and you produce more currency than your gold reserves can justify, then gold will flow out of your bank or out of your country. So there's this natural check via capitalistic money, which is gold, right? Gold was selected by the free market. It's not decreed by a government. It provided this natural check on government action. We've never seen a pure free market because money has always been monopolized and coerced, frankly. Free market is one in which government only protects life, liberty, and property. And so that has a very minimal role in society as network security for the economic trade network. Any government function that goes beyond those three core functions, which by the way are pretty much the core tenets of morality as well. So government's just really intended to preserve, natural law, if you will. Anything that goes beyond that moves us closer to an unfree market. So every regulation, every act of coercion is actually a gradation closer to a purely unfree market, which would be a monopoly. So in terms of what I guess theoretically we could say goes wrong in the free market is that it's volatile. It's accepting short-term volatility in exchange for less long-run volatility.
Yeah.
And this tends to be the way of nature, by the way. So if we could look at something like, there's a region in North America called Baja California, and it runs into the United States and it runs down into Mexico as well. So the same topology, but two different jurisdictions. In the US, we very heavily manage forest fires. We're trying to manage nature effectively. Whereas in Mexico, it's much more unregulated. When wildfires spring up, they let them burn off. North America, when wildfires spring up, we're actually extinguishing them. So we're constantly trying to dampen the short-run volatility of these small brush fires, whereas in Mexico, we just let them burn. We let nature do its thing.
Yeah.
The consequence of this is that the wildfires still occur eventually, but they're much larger and much more devastating in North America, where human intervention has occurred, because it's dampening nature's natural corrective mechanism of clearing this underbrush with these more frequent and smaller fires at the cost of much larger fires. So again, we're delaying short-term volatility and exacerbating long-run volatility. And in Mexico, it's the opposite, right? Just these wildfires burn much smaller, more continuously over time. The further effect of that in North America is that the fires can get so big and so hot that it burns away the topsoil. So it actually destroys the fertility of the soil itself. So the point of this is that human intervention, right? Even the intention behind North American authorities managing that forest fire is to create less destruction. That is the intention. But the intention is divergent from the outcome. So in Talebian speak, he would say that human intervention moves us from mediocristan into extremistan. Mm-hmm. So mediocristan would be something much more like nature, where, for instance, you can't double your body weight in a day. Probably can't even do it in a year, right? But in extremistan, which is something much more information-based, you can double or send your net worth to zero in a single trade, in a single moment, right? So when we try and intervene with natural biological systems that have these feedback loops, we actually start to push the system more to behave more like an extremistan system that has, less short-run volatility, but more extreme long-run volatility. The central banking itself, this was in the 1848 Manifesto of the Communist Party. Measure number 5 reads, an exclusive state monopoly and centralized control over cash and credit. So the central bank is a Marxist or communist institution. It is antithetical to the free market principles on which the United States was founded. And indeed, the United States resisted the implementation of a central bank. Finally in 1913, the Federal Reserve was implemented, and it's been kind of all downhill from there. Communism and capitalism, it's also a matter of scale. The ideal behind communism is from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Sounds beautiful, right? Sounds like a great, peaceful, harmonious way to organize ourselves. As we move into this larger system of socioeconomic cooperation, which is necessary to deepen the division of labor, to generate more wealth, right? We need to interact with one another on much larger scales than this communistic utopian ideal. We get into the realm of capitalism, where we need really sound rules, hard rules, consensus, verifiability. In Soviet Russia, is they tried to replace the profit motive or the price signal with this devotion to this nationalistic faith and devotion, where it's like, you don't need self-interest anymore. You don't need prices or profits. You can just protect Mother Russia, right, and serve Mother Russia, and that would create wealth. And what happened? Right, they destroyed price signals. There were shortages, there were famines, there's all levels of corruption. People have to run the system no matter what. So when people are always pursuing something for nothing, and you put someone in a seat of much closer to absolute power, where they're making all the pricing decisions, they own all of the productive factors in the economy, they're not beholden to any market force. There's no market check on their action. That institution tends to become more corrupt. And further, it's an inferior resource strategy. The other way to think about free market versus central planning is it's decentralized or distributed computing versus centralized computing. But our active awareness, I think, is 120 bits per second. In a centralized planning body like in Soviet Russia, where they had the pricing czar, maybe they had 10, 20,000 people deciding the prices for the entire country, you're only getting that much data throughput, right? 20,000 people times 120 bits per second. Whereas in a free market, if everyone is free to interact with deep capital markets based on an accurate price, you're getting the data throughput of 120 bits per second times the entire economy, right? So it's a more efficient means for disseminating knowledge effectively. And then again, knowledge is just, the more knowledge a socioeconomic structure can contain, the more wealthy it is, right? Prices, tools, all these things are just knowledge. So in that respect, that's why something like capitalism, even in its marginalized form, state capitalism, outcompetes communism. It's distributed computing versus centralized computing.